Hey homeschool friends, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my September update video. So I really enjoy doing these homeschool update videos where I talk about life, about family subjects, about my kids' individual subjects, which is they're in 4th grade, 3rd grade, and kindergarten. And so there's a lot to chat about these days. So let's just hop in because I know these can get a little bit long. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to the channel if you're new, or welcome back if you've been coming for a while. So like I said, we are going to go through what happened in September in my homeschool. Lots of fun things to report, you guys, lots of fun things. But before we get into all of that, I do need to make the quick disclaimer that a lot of these materials that I'm going to talk about, a lot of our curriculum was gifted to me this year from Sonlight. It was gifted in exchange for my honest review, which I always share, especially in these videos. So thanks again to Sonlight. But let's just hop into a couple key things that have happened. The first being, which you probably saw from the thumbnail, is I had to adjust a bit, quite a bit, for my daughter, my 8-year-old, my 3rd grader, because I just pushed her too hard. And I'll explain some of that. That's okay. I needed to pull things back and readjust. And I'm thinking we're in a much better place. So I will share all of that when I get to her. And the other thing I wanted to share was just kind of a general idea of simplifying, especially in terms of language arts, which this is not a negative thing, because if you watched last month's video, I chatted about the fact that I'm trying to figure out how to add Brave Writer and Sonlight Language Arts and Logic of English all into kind of this big plan for language arts for my 4th grader and 3rd grader. And I feel like things have filtered out to what I think I'm going to keep. And so I'll chat more about that as well. So those are kind of the big overarching ideas that I want to talk about. But let's hop into life updates. And let's just say there's nothing really to update. I love the fact that there's nothing to update. My health is going pretty well. Family life is just good. I love this time of year. So I feel productive and energetic and just still very excited about what we're doing in our homeschool. And sometimes that does change come springtime. But right now I'm very much in the academic spirit, if you will. So life it's good. Nothing really to complain about. So I'm going to move then to family subjects. Family subjects being history, Bible, literature, as well as science, and some kind of extras we've been doing I want to talk about as well. And so when it comes to history, so like I said in the previous video, we are doing HBLC with my big kids, and HBLC, that's the second part of world history. And then I'm also doing HBLK with my 5-year-old twins, which is kind of an intro to world cultures. And so I talked about a couple things last time, how we were just so excited about the history and how it was all tying together so well. So because I talked about that so much, I wasn't able to talk about some of the other things that are really cool about this year. So what I've been loving is this. So this is the geography songs that comes with the HBLC program. Now, I was really leery of this book because I had heard, oh, it's so outdated, the songs are so terrible. It's like wah wah, like people just kind of complained and thought it was lame. So I'm like, oh, I hope it's not lame. My kids love it. You guys, these songs get stuck in our head, and I find that even my 5-year-olds are humming some of these songs. Like the Scandinavia one really got stuck in our head, how it was like Copenhagen, Denmark, Oslo, Norway. And it just kind of teaches the places, it teaches where the countries are. And so then as we're listening to the song, we're also looking at the maps, and then we're also pulling out our globe. And so there's lots of things that we are interacting with using these songs that is just helped. It's really broadened my kids' understanding of places in the world. And yes, we do use our markable maps. We use all the maps, we use the globes. And I feel more inspired this year because we are doing a little bit more geography, if you will. And so this has been a huge hit, a surprising huge hit, really, because I thought it was going to be lame. And really, we haven't in the past done a very good job using those CDs for memorizing things. Like we have the ones for the Bible verses, and we have a tough time listening to those songs. But for some reason, this is going much better, and my kids are really enjoying the fact that they understand where things are on the globe. And then it's fun because then if, say, we're reading a book that's set in like Denmark, we can go to the globe and I can be like, do you remember what these other 3 are here up in Scandinavia? And if they get the song going, they can even tell me what the capitals are, you know? So it's just really fun. So I've been really enjoying that. The other thing that's been fun, so for my big kids and HBLC, is we transitioned out of Vikings into Robin Hood. I don't know what it is about the beginning of HBLC, but so far it's my favorite level. I feel like it's just been really fun. Like, not only are Vikings fun, but Robin Hood is just a really fun story, and we've been going through all the different movies. We did the Disney one with Fox and stuff. There was another one that was from like 1952, which followed this story a lot closer. So that was really fun. So what was neat is we were able to finish this book up, which we just did, and I highly recommend. They really enjoyed it. It was very action-packed. It was very exciting. I feel like even my twins would sit still and just listen to Robin Hood, as opposed to some of our other books where they would kind of wander off. But everybody really liked this book, and it's really fun because they watched the movie, I think it was called Robin Hood and His Merry Men, and so they got to compare the 1952 movie to the Disney movie, and they also got to compare this, which followed it a lot closer. And you know, there is so many Robin Hoods out there, but most of them are not appropriate for kids. Like, I loved growing up with Kevin Costner one, Prince of Thieves. Let me know down below if you know what I'm talking about. I loved that movie, and I cannot wait to share it with my kids, but obviously I'm not going to do it now. We have just requested the Tom and Jerry version of Robin Hood, so we'll be watching that shortly. So it's been really fun. It's added a really fun element to our homeschool, just to be able to kind of expand on the Robin Hood stuff. So we read this and loved it, and it also has been tying very much into our history readings. We're reading the Time Traveler book again, which I feel like I mentioned in all of these, but we're in the medieval castles and knights section, which is so fun. So those are the books I wanted to talk about when I was talking about like history and geography. And then as for the twins, so HBLK, we are going through this book, and it's another favorite of theirs. So they really do like these kind of story-based books. So it's like these kids go back in time, because it just makes it more tangible to them. And I could be like, how do you think you would feel going back into time? Would you feel more like the older brother or the middle little Binkerton, or whatever the family name is? And they get to kind of explore that, and my twins really do enjoy it. They enjoy engaging with that, because some of this information my bigger kids learned last year, so it's nice because it kind of reviews ancient Greece with them. But for the twins, it focuses on the Olympics, it focuses on all sorts of stuff. And so that's been a big hit for them. And then history, Bible. Okay, Bible. Bible's been good. Actually, Bible's been great. So let me tell you why. let me tell you what's going on. So I brought out, this is the current week we are doing within HBLC. So this is HBLC. So this is for my bigger kids. It has the Bible up here, and it has the parent reading, and it has the student reading, and then it has all the memory work. What I've been really liking, and this seems obvious, but sometimes it takes me a while to figure out some stuff. And with Sonlight, they have some parent reading and student reading. They have extra things to talk about, because sometimes I would just read it, and either we'd be in a hurry and we need to go do some other things, and I wouldn't talk to the kids. But what I found this past month or so is I've been really focusing in on this paragraph. So within the parent reading, it talks about like, okay, well, in these chapters that will be read this week in the book of John, like for instance, it says Jesus now begins to regularly tell his followers what is about to happen. And so it kind of goes through this, and then what I'm doing is I'm paraphrasing this before we start. I'll be like, do you guys remember we just read about Lazarus? Do you remember Jesus is just now in the upper room and he just washed the disciples' feet? So what do you think is going to happen? Why are we focusing so much on that? And we get to talk more about that. And then it also has for their readings, like for instance, we're in Exodus, and we can talk about the fact that, wasn't it interesting that Genesis, which we had just finished, was clearly part of God's plan. All the things that happened to Joseph and his brothers and things like that is clearly part of God's plan. And then, 400 years later, this is how Exodus opens. The new Pharaoh, terrible things happening. That is also part of God's plan. And we get to have these kind of conversations. So this is an obvious tip, but sometimes I don't always use my instructor guide all that well. And when I do, I feel like I have richer conversations with my kids. So that part of Bible's going amazing. And the other part, I saw someone on, I think it was the Facebook Sonlight Moms group, recommend for this book, because this book is good. I really like the questions, but it's hard to read it to the kids. I feel like they get a little bogged down. So what I've started doing is reading it on Sunday, highlighting some sections, thinking about it, and then I summarize it to my kids. This week the question was, did Jesus teach that he's the only way to God? And the best part is the parts we were talking about in John, the book of John, dealt with that. And so we're like, oh, you could see how Jesus does teach this. And then it gives in this book some extra information of like universalists or things like that, that they believe these things. And what do you do with those ideas? And we can kind of talk about it. And it's really good. So I found that summarizing the idea, the argument, the question, and then conversing with my kids has been working a lot better, because I felt like they weren't quite getting it. It was going over their heads, but the conversation, the question in and of itself wasn't something that would go over their heads. It just needed me to kind of summarize and bring it down, if that makes sense. So I'm happier with this. Even though I've been really liking it, I feel like it's working better now that I'm kind of taking that tactic. So that's Bible. And then literature. Like I said, we have some good literature going. So for the big kids, HBLC, we finished this one, Sticks Across the Chimney. I talked more about this last time. It's about these two kids who grew up by a Viking burial mound. It ended really well. My kids really liked it. It's a funny book in the sense that I think it's kind of hard to track down. Like maybe Sonlight had it kind of reprinted for this level in particular. But I'm so happy they have it in this level. I felt like it really brought a lot of understanding to the topic of Vikings and kind of Denmark and just that culture. And so we finished that, and then we read all of Robin Hood, and I've already kind of talked about it, and just, I loved it. This version was really good, really good. So they loved that, and then we are just now starting this one. So this is The Door in the Wall. I'm really looking forward to it. I feel it will help just castle times come alive for them. So we are excited to get into this one. So that's really what's coming up. I don't really know too much because we just barely started it. And so I will let you know in October how this goes. So that is on our list. And then the boys, the little boys, we finished Humphrey. They loved it. They are now listening to a bunch of the audiobooks. And I think I might have mentioned that last time. Sorry if I did, but they are enjoying all of the extra audiobooks. And then we're reading this book, the Feelings book. This is good. Okay, guys. I've also heard some issues with this. Some people just have strong opinions. I think it's really good. I think it follows a lot of different emotions. Now, I feel like what lands with my 5.5-year-olds, almost 6-year-olds, is different than what lands with my bigger kids. So I read this initially with my big kids when they did the American History unit. And it was good. But I feel like as I'm reading it to the twins now, my big kids will come in and kind of listen to it, and we can have bigger conversations. We can have conversations of like, do you ever feel this way? Where like your little brothers take your stuff and then you're just so mad at them for taking your stuff, and you're so worried that your stuff is going to get ruined because they're 5, right? And you just yell at them without considering how they might feel. It's actually kind of been useful to use for all of my kids, even though it's scheduled for my kindergartners. And so I think it's a good book. And there's other parts in here that are, I feel like, almost more geared towards maybe an older child. Like there's one in here that talks about this kid who does something he knows he shouldn't. His mom starts yelling. He feels bad. He feels ashamed. He feels embarrassed and guilty and all those words. And I feel like my older kids understand those feelings and words better, so we can have a better conversation. But, you know, it's not to say that a 5-year-old can't feel those feelings. I just feel like there's a bigger depth of understanding in the older kids. So it's really working for us. We like it. Okay, so those are the books we are reading for Sonlight. Now, we still have some evening books. My kindergartners are finishing up the 4th book in the Heartwood Hotel. In the evening, they're almost done. They read it with their dad. They're almost done. I don't know what we're going to read after that, but it's so good. We love those books. And then I have 2 other books for my big kids that are really good. These 2. So we've been reading this one mostly, and it's The Mad Wolf's Daughter, so by Diane McGrath. This is a really good book. So it's about this little girl. Well, she's not little. She's probably like 12-year-old girl who is in a family of Scottish like warlords, or they're in a war band, and they go out and like steal their goods and all these things. But she's like the youngest child in this group, and there's not a mom, so she's kind of growing up with her brothers until one day her brothers get taken taken by like the knights from the nearby castle, and she has to figure out how to rescue them. So we're talking, what time is it? It's like 1200s Scotland is basically the time frame of this book. Now, I would say if your kids are a little bit on the sensitive side, this one might be a little much. My daughter gets a little bit like anxious, I guess is the best word, because there's some scenes where it's like they're alone in the woods, her and this wounded knight that is helping her get to the castle to help rescue her brothers and dad and everything. And then there's this bandit in the woods, and there's always these bandits that attack travelers, and she's alone and she's with this wounded knight who can't defend himself. And so there's some kind of more intense scenes so far. And I mean, we've only made it like 75 pages. So there's some intense scenes. So you'd have to kind of gauge that on your kids. But my son is loving this, loving it. And I actually got this recommendation from Build Your Library. I feel like I said that last time because I like to pull some extra historical books from there. And it's really good though for setting the stage of what it would feel like in 1200s Scotland. So far so good. The other book we are reading is the next Brave Writer book. So this is The Girl Who Stole an Elephant. And we're planning on using this book more in October, but I like to kind of start reading it ahead of time just so that we have enough time to get to it. And I'll be explaining how we're changing up how we're using this book once I get to kind of my big kids and their language arts. But so far we're really enjoying it. It kind of has a Robin Hood flair to it, which is why I wanted to prioritize it to around the time we were reading Robin Hood. It's about this girl in Sri Lanka who like steals from the rich to help out her poor villagers. And then it opens up with like her stealing the queen's jewels. And we'll see what's going to happen. But so far so good. So it started with some more intense kind of scenes as well, like she's getting chased by some guards and things like that. But it's really fun, and I love just the feel of just such a different place where they're talking about howler monkeys, they're talking about coconut flowers, they're talking about all of this stuff that's just different. It's just so different. And so it's led to some fun conversations and some geography lessons, to be honest. So those are our read alouds, what we're reading either in the middle of or what we read in September, and it was really good. So history, Bible, literature, science. Science, there's not really that much to report. I feel like my little kids are still reading the reptiles book from Usborne. There's been a couple good experiments. We haven't done as many experiments as we did last time, only because some of them have been a little bit of repeats. But I'm holding this up because we've been reading this book. So we finished the Wolf book, which we loved so far. That's our favorite. And this is an Usborne book, a first encyclopedia of seas and oceans. It's a typical Usborne book. It's still really good though. I feel like there's enough information that is review for my kids, but there's enough new information that keeps it really interesting. And then again, I'm trying to utilize those activity sheets in a more independent way, not just to like, let's chat and check it off, but like, we have bigger conversations where I try to draw more out of them because it is a little bit of a review, and so they know some of this stuff already. And so science is just fine. There's not too much to report. So let's move on. Let's move on to individual subjects because that's where most of the changes have been in my homeschool for this past month. But again, good changes. I'm not in an anxious, panicky sort of changing mood. It's good stuff. So let me start with my son. I think I will split out my son and daughter this time because I've split them more, which was part of the problem. So with my son, my fourth grader, 9.5, I'd say things are going really pretty well. So when it comes to math, we're using Nicole the math lady, it's going pretty well. I feel like on some days when it's not going well, I encourage him to rewatch the video because sometimes he gets hung up on the problems and he doesn't know what's going on, and then he gets kind of flustered. And I'm like, okay, let's just rewatch the video and we'll see if that answers your question. If not, we will definitely dive in and I'll try and teach him a different way. But oftentimes that's enough. And the other thing that helps him is if I read it to him. So he'll be having problems with one of the questions, and oftentimes all I do is come over and I'll be like, let's read it together. And so I have him read it word by word. I'm like, do you know what that word means? Product? Do you know what that means? He's like, no. I'm like, okay. And then we'll go through, I'll define it and ask him. And he's like, oh, well then the answer is this. And I was like, well, yes. But he just didn't understand what the question was asking. So a lot of times it's kind of a reading thing or it's a definition problem. So either he didn't read it slow enough and correctly, or he didn't understand the definition of a word. And so I found that just reading it to him helps him. and it's not a big deal. And so just being available for reading. And I have been having them flag more things, which helps me because a lot of times I'm doing like kindergarten or something else while he's doing math, and I'm just like, just flag it and I'll come to you, and I'll come and we'll go through all your flags. And most of the time that just works fine. I feel like there's only been like 1 or 2 days this past month where he's just been like, I don't understand at all, and I'm like, okay, we can handle that too. So it's been good. Math has been still a really good fit. And then as for language arts, so language arts, it's good. It's good still. I feel like Logic of English is what we are using for spelling, grammar, and vocabulary, those 3 main things. And it teaches it very logically with lots of rules, all the phonograms, all the sounds. There's a lot of information, and sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. It's even overwhelming for me. Like, how do you mark the 4 sounds of Y? What do they say, and how do you represent them? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to do this. And so it can be a bit overwhelming, but he likes it. He says that it's a really good fit for him, even though it can be hard. And so at times when it feels like he's not catching on, we'll pause and we'll do like a whole review day. We'll go back through everything. We'll go back over like possessive noun adjectives and all these things that I've never even heard of that I just intuitively know. I'm guessing somebody taught me at some point. I just didn't know the name of them. And so it's like, we'll go back through and remind him and keep talking through that. Even though I do feel like the Essentials program does do a really pretty good job of bringing back things and keeping some review concepts on the table or in the practice sheets and stuff like that. So it's really good. What I'm doing with him here is I am realizing that I have this problem where I want to finish something in a certain amount of time. Like, I'm like, I really want him to get through level A by the end of his 4th grade year. And here's the thing. Who cares? It'll be fine. I would rather him get it than go so fast that he is flustered, which is where we were getting, because I was like, I really want to get a unit done a week. And so I'd kind of push him. And then I'm like, I want to get another unit done, and it's like, who says I have to get a unit done? And so what we're going to do is we're going to just take it a bit slower. I'm going to try and watch his cues a bit more, because what I realized after being on Facebook groups and different things like that is with the way the Essentials is set up, the level A is the most intensive because you're learning it all. You're learning all the phonograms. You're learning all of these rules and spelling rules. By the time you go to level B, you're going back through this same information. You just have new spelling words, new vocabulary words, but you have the same phonograms, the same spelling rules. And so it will go much quicker once we get to level B and level C, because those things will be reviewed, and how well we learn them now will really affect how quickly we can go through the program when we get to B and C. I hope that makes sense. But once I had that realization, I realized it makes the most sense to spend the time really learning it now, even if we have to split each lesson into 2, things like that. So we're going to slow it down, and I'm not going to be such a pushy teacher on that anymore. I think that'll be good. So Logic of English is a big section of his language arts, but so is Sonlight and Brave Writer. And in the previous month, in August, we used a lot of the Brave Writer stuff. We used the Dart, and then I was trying to use the Dart in September, and we just weren't getting to it, you guys. It was just like too much, which happens, right, when you over plan. And really, it wasn't over planning. I was trying to figure out what works the best for us. If I should pick up the Dart and have that be the way we do a lot of the mechanics, which is kind of a review of what we're learning in Logic of English, or it's just different. And I really like how it's taught, things like that. But we weren't doing it. We weren't doing it very well in September. And so what I did is I looked at Brave Writer, I looked back through it, and I figured out what are some of the things I really like about the Darts. Because maybe it's not doing the copy work. Maybe it's not teaching all the mechanics and sentence structure things out of there. What I really like and what we have really enjoyed were a few things. First, the literary device. So I just pulled out my Otter Dart. So this is the one where we were talking about verse novels. All right, I loved that. I loved talking more about the differences between prose and verse novels, and we really enjoyed Otter, and it was so different. And so it has a lot of information about verse novels, what they are, how they work, things like that. And then there was this writing activity that had to do with verse novels. My kids loved it. What she did is she took a prose book and you turned it into poetry. So we pulled out Harry Potter, and we picked a section that had a lot of good description and things like that. And then what you did is I took a copy, I copied that page, and then you cut it apart with scissors and you made it into a verse novel. And my kids loved it. Like, here's their little Harry Potter verse novel, and it just broke down that section or that like small paragraph in the book, and it changed the way you read it. It changed the way you understood it. And so we would read back through the original, and then we would read it more as a verse novel, and they were like, oh, that is different. And so it was really fun. It was fun to kind of experience that. It was like, instead of just teaching about verse novels, it was almost like they made one, and so they understood it a bit more. So I loved that. So I like the literary device. I like the little writing assignment that goes with it. I really do like their little big juicy questions. I think they're good. I mean, a lot of them I would do anyway, but I just like having extra questions. And then the party. So the book party ideas. This is one of the things that drove me to Brave Writer, right? And so we did that for Otter. Maybe I'll put some pictures. I put up like streamers and made a kelp forest. We played a game with sharks and otters. We did a watercolor of otters. It was just really fun, and my kids were like, this is awesome. This is a really fun thing to do. And so my thoughts going forward are to take the things that are a hit, right? And that's the point of how you use a curriculum. So those were my favorite parts once I did some reflecting. And so my thoughts are going forward is I can take the books we're reading and talk about the literary device. I can do that little writing assignment. We can do the book party, but that's it. And we're going to read the book because the books are always fun. And we're going to not do the rest of it currently, or at least that's my plan for this upcoming month. But with my son, he is very ready for just kind of the writing technique that's taught in the Growing Brave Writer. So we've been doing some of the activities, like I think she has like a communication game and some other things, but really I want him to get to like free writing, which is what I'm really interested in my kids getting to. So we're working through this program. It's a program. I mean, it's mostly just giving you kind of some activities to really support the learning, but it is also about writing. And I did pick up partnership writing, the program. I have yet to implement it. I was going to. It was on the plan for September. It didn't happen. So what I'm doing instead is I'm simplifying that idea. All those ideas that come with partnership writing, where you're sitting beside your child, you're working together. He writes a line, I write a line. We're doing that. We're doing it differently. So let me share something with you. So what I decided to do is during this kind of brainstorm session where I was like, it's just too much. It was too much. And I was okay with that because I was trying to figure out what parts I wanted. Is I've decided to put the Sonlight Language Arts back on our plates. But I'm moving him just to level 4 because he's capable of it. Level 3 and level 4 are for the same set of students. I can't remember what the age range is, but it's the same age range. It just has some harder books, which I would like him to kind of start reading some bigger chapter books. And so we're doing the language arts more. We're not doing the spelling or vocabulary or handwriting wordly wise. We're not doing anything up here because he is still doing logic and English. What we're doing, we're not on target for what readers we're using because we have 3 level 3 readers to still use before we go into level 4. So I'm not going to stay on schedule for readers, but we're just going to read them in the order we should. It's not a big deal. But what I've brought back is the creative expression. You guys, I love it. So this is where we're getting our copywork. There is copywork application, which again, I'll take or leave as I need it. If it's a big review, I could use it as review. If it's just, I'll take or leave it because I feel like we're getting a lot from Logic of English in that day. So that's optional. I might use it, I might not. But the creative expression. So this is where I've really liked it. So with my son is using some of those partnership writing ideas, but also using the prompts, which is what I like better about Sonlight than I like about Brave Writer. So it has the prompts, and like for instance, this week was, here's a story starter picture and some questions to discuss and brainstorm what your story is going to be based on this picture. And what I've liked is I've actually, again, paid more attention to the instructor's guide. And I've been like, okay, so these are the things we're going to be working on. We're going to work on including a beginning, middle, and end to your story. We're including introducing your characters and your setting, developing plot events in a way that's easy for a reader to understand. So I'm telling him this ahead of time. I was like, this is our goal. Okay, so we have these brainstorm ideas with the idea that this is how we're going to set up our paragraph. And then what we did is we sat side by side at the computer and we traded off on sentences. I was like, well, let's start it like this. I'll be like, it looks like you want to include the bad guys from here. And he's like, well, we should say it like da 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 da. I'm like, okay. And I will kind of rephrase, and I was like, how does this sound? And I'll kind of work on it. I was like, do you see how I did this? He's like, yes, I like that. And then I'll be like, okay, you take the computer. What do you want to say next? And we'll kind of talk about it, and I'll help him. And while he's typing, I'll spell things for him. I'll also remind him what he said. So I'll kind of be the storage of his sentence. Like, so he'll say a sentence, and then as he's worried about typing, he'll kind of forget, but I just kind of fill it in for him. I'm like, you said this, 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 and this. And then it'll be my turn. I was like, well, okay, so do you think that is enough for setting the stage? Did we introduce our characters enough? He's like, oh, well, maybe we should say this. I said, oh, that sounds good. You know, and so it's a very much of a back and forth. I feel like I have grown so much as a teacher in this. In the past, I'd be like, okay, well, now it says on day 4, you should, on your own piece of paper, write your story. Okay, go. And I'd be like, I don't know how to help him, or should I help him too much? And I think reading this and just watching a lot of the Julie Bogart content has helped me figure out how much I'm involved. And you guys, he responds so well to this. He loves it. He's like, when can we finish our story? When can we sit down and kind of work together on it? And I think what he loves about it is he's always had these ideas, but he struggles with the mechanics, right? And the spelling and all of that stuff. But when I do it with him, none of that's an issue. But I'm still teaching. He's still learning a ton because we're structuring our stories. We're paying attention to certain parts of it. And he's realizing that he has to have some form and structure to it. But yet he doesn't have to worry about spelling. He gets to think creatively as well as think about how a reader would read his stuff. So anyway, that is a long explanation to the fact that I'm bringing back Sonlight Language Arts, or at least the creative expression and the readers. I mean, this is not a new story for me. I've always liked those parts of Sonlight. We're bringing that back, but I'm using all the techniques I've learned through Brave Writer, and then we're sprinkling in a lot of that fun stuff still. We're reading extra books, so we're going to have a book party about this. We're going to talk about the literary device from this book, which I can't even remember what it's going to be. And so far, so good. That's my plan. That's kind of what's settled out for language arts, especially for my son. And before I move to my daughter, I just want to mention what he's reading. So I had him sub out Knights of the Round Table. He loved it. There was another book in the Sonlight Level 3 readers that would have been just fine, but he loved this and he wants more of these. So that's good. I'll just get him some more of those, and those could be more nighttime readers. We did pick back up the readers, and the next one was Brave Kids, True Stories from America's Past of Cora Freer. This is such a good book. It's also very kind of action-packed, but it's historical, and it's about a prairie fire, and it's really intense, and he liked it. It's really good. He's almost done. So those are the 2 books he's reading for school. He has some other nighttime readers, which I shared in the 9-year-old book recommendation video. So that's what he's reading. Okay, moving on to my daughter. So like I said, I pushed her too hard. That's what I realized. She wasn't responding well. There was a lot of like tears and pushback, and I'm not going to get all into how that was for her. Just there was a general sense that this current plan wasn't working. And what I realized is I was pushing her too far. I really forget that she is not the same age as her brother, even though I put them in similar curriculum. They're 16 months apart, so they're close in age. But yet I forget, she's not 9.5, she's 8. You know what I mean? And there's just a difference between 9.5 and 8. And so I just kind of wanted to hurry her up. And some things that were just causing problems were logic of English. She just was not ready for that. She wasn't ready for how detailed that was. And then the realization is like, maybe she won't even need it. And that's okay too. And I think as I've been homeschooling longer, I have realized that that's okay. I feel like at first I'm like, well, I purchased this curriculum, and so it's going to be good for all of my kids. And so that means all of my kids have to use it. And that's just not true. And we might use it. I'm waiting till she's 9 because I started him on Logic of English when he was 9. And so 9 will be next fall for her. So we'll try again then. If it's not right, it might not be right. She might have a little bit more intuition to language than he does, where he needs the rules. Maybe she doesn't. I haven't given that too much of thought. I've just kind of followed her behind her brother, if that makes sense. So I'm trying to be a little bit more of a thinker. And I realize with that, I was pushing her too hard. So we took Logic of English off her plate. We also took Brave Writer off her plate. I was trying to kind of combine them, but like I just said, we're not doing the darts anyway. And so when I kind of decided to do that, it took all of those things off her plate. And what I landed on is what we started with, which was Sonlight Language Arts Level 3. And I don't have it to hold up, but what I decided to do is just to kind of go back through there, because she is reading the level 3 readers. She's enjoying the readers. The ones she finished writing the Pony Express, and now she is reading this one, which is Secret Valley. This is about the gold rush. This was about the Pony Express, and they've both been really good. She loves the fact that she is doing well with this level of reader. And so that's my daughter and her reading, but we switched to the entire Sonlight Language Arts, which we have yet to do. Usually we're like, oh, I only use creative expression and reading. Now I'm using it all. We're using the spelling. And really what it is it's just a realization I had. So I've been reading this book, which I highly recommend if you've never read it. It's by Ruth Beechek. It's the 3 R's, grades K through 3. And so it talks about different ways for teaching spelling. I'm going to read this to you because this made a difference to me. It says, a good time to tackle spelling is about 4th grade reading level, when the child's reading fluently and has built a good visual foundation for how words should look. In the meantime, teaching bits of spelling as they fit into daily lessons. And so what I took from that is my daughter's not there. She's not reading a 4th grade level. And also what I've heard from other like middle school teachers or different people who have commented on my videos is like, it takes a while sometimes. It's just exposure to words. And my kids love audiobooks, like I've said, and so they don't always pick up physical books. And I'm like, guys, the more you read with your eyes, the better your spelling will be, because you'll see those words enough. And so it's been pushing them to read more. And so for her, I've just decided, okay, I don't have to push it hard until she's at a certain level. So we're just going to use the Sonlight Language Arts spelling. And it's a list form. I'm adding some of these words from the Ruth Beechek book, some of the most common words. We're just kind of going off of that, and we're making it very low key to see kind of maybe she responds better to the list form now. I feel like I tried it a little while back and it wasn't a huge hit, but I feel like I've grown as a teacher and she's a different kid. So anyway, we're doing the spelling, and we've also added on these two. So it's Wordly Wise B and MCP Phonics C. And so basically what these are is just worksheets that help her review her phonics and help her with some vocabulary. Are these necessary? No, not necessarily. Even in the language arts program on the grid, it says optional. But what is nice for me is it keeps her busy while I'm doing some other things, because I'll be teaching the twins, or I'll be teaching my son. And so it gives her a few other things to do. So we're doing spelling, vocab, and phonics through Sonlight Language Arts, and then we're doing the readers and the creative expression. And with the creative expression, I'm not even to the point of partnership writing with her. It's still in the point of like, we're gonna help jot things down for her. But I picked up where we left off. So we're on we just finished the first couple weeks of level 3, which are the diamond notes, which I made a whole like week in the life of language arts for Sonlight, level 3. And so go watch that if you want. But we've been working our way through that, and I'm just better at it now. I know how to kind of encourage her to write her concluding sentence, you know, and I know how to like help her kind of vary her words. And she also just feels a little bit more comfortable with it than say her brother, as long as I'm very involved. And so it's just, for me, it's learning what involvement level I need to be in with my kids for writing that makes them thrive. And we just camp out there for a while. And so that's been good. So it's been a really good switch. You guys, it's been kind of a little chaotic this month because I've been like having those realizations, doing some critical thinking, figuring out how to use the curriculum I have. And that's where we've landed. It's really, she's just doing Sonlight Language Arts. And then we have obviously the handwriting and the typing for her too. And then her math is fine. Nicole, the math lady, she's doing great. She was doing a little pushback on that, but I feel like she's just overloaded everywhere and she was just kind of flustered. So now that we've lessened the language arts, she has a confidence back for math. It all ties together, or at least it does for her. And so it's been really good. So we're at a good spot. I'll keep updating you. But like I said, I always treat these first couple months as like where I'm figuring things out. We're kind of setting up what will work. And then hopefully most years, this is what's happened, is then we can just take those things and just run with them. So that's the hopes. So she's doing really good. And then my twins, you guys, there's not much to report. They're just doing the next lesson. We're doing Abeka K5 for math as well as phonics, and it's just going well. They just kind of keep at it. Their blending is getting so much better. They're just really progressing, and it's really cute to see. Some days they don't really want to do it, and when that happens, we try to do something fun. Like the other day, I put a blanket over the table and we did kindergarten under the table. And they loved it, and then they were just blending and doing all their things, and they weren't whining about it just because I just changed a small thing, and then we did our schooling. So you guys, it's been so good, and I'm really thankful for that. So even though there's been a lot of changes, we're in a good spot. So anyway, let me know down below, how did September go for you? How is the start of the year? Because I still feel like it's very much the starting of the school year. How is that going for you? Let me know down below. And otherwise, you guys, just give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you want to, and I will see you in the next homeschool video. All right, guys, take care.